My name is Nolan Hack. I'm a black revolutionary from Los Angeles, California.
My name is SeDerrick. I'm a writer, part-time activist here in Texas, and I'm also a double master's student.
My name is Julie Dye. I'm from Jackson, Michigan. I'm a Pokagon Band Potawatomi Nation citizen and elder, and also an activist, anti-mascot activist with the Michigan Coalition Against Racism in Sports and Media.
I'm Deerinwater. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. From Oklahoma and Texas originally, but I live in D.C. In Piscataway Nation territory. I'm a journalist and an organizer around Indigenous issues.
I'm Walelu Goodman. I'm an Indigenous activist and I am Cherokee and Choctaw. I'm currently residing in Massachusetts and will be moving to California and beginning a master's PhD program at Pacifica.
Hi, I'm Tanja Burkhard. I'm a biracial black woman from Germany. I now live in Pittsburgh, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher in education, and I focus on black immigrant women's experiences and specifically their relationship with indigeneity and decolonization, those kinds of things. Sorry, I'm still sick, I realize.
Oh, you're fine.
It's only my third time.
I'm so sorry for you.
Can't get enough.
So it's now Wednesday, and the fiasco with Warren and Trump restarted, I should say, on Monday. And I heard, I was watching Al Jazeera this afternoon, and they're already on to the next thing. It's Trump and Theresa May. So the fake outrage of the nation.
He will not stop. He will not stop. Well, this morning he was retweeting, I think, some like far-right British stuff. Something about Britain first. And I think that woman, whoever runs that group, I think she has, today has been convicted of some crime in Britain. Let me see what it is. She was convicted of harassing Muslims. But I don't know what the exact, I don't know what the exact charge was, but I do know she was sentenced today.
This is one particular.
Yeah, so she started this, I guess it's, oh, go ahead.
Oh, finish the thought. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, she started, I guess, this group that's kind of about Britain First. I guess it's like a runoff of, or a spin-off of America First. And they apparently are linked to Nazi activity and harassing.
That's Frank Underwood's fuel from House of Cards, America First. Well, this is
his was America Works, right?
That's true.
Yeah, it was America Works.
Someone's got to have America.
No, it doesn't.
It sounds too used. It sounds like it's been used before. America First.
Yeah.
It sounds like it. Anyways, this whole issue is so complex because you have the elephant in the room of the Disney film creating the myth in the first place that a child victim of sexual assault is an adult, and then all these years later that myth is continued, and then you have Donald calling a person who's pretending to be an indigenous woman by a word that isn't even her original name, and it's just like a clusterfuck of
disrespect.
No.
Just disrespect. That whole event was like, I watched that on YouTube because I can't do the politics every week. Like when I was like on Twitter every single day, like intensely, and like just following it, it was just way too much. And I was just like, I need to get these people out of my space. I can't have this kind of energy in my face all the time. So I try to catch up towards the ends of the week, like with all the craziness that's going on. So yeah, I watched that on YouTube, and that whole entire thing was really disrespectful. Especially that portrait of Andrew Jackson that was also there. I don't know who said that would be.
Well, he put it up there. If there was some other
he did.
He
loved.
I don't know if it was Lincoln or Jefferson, but Trump put the Jackson portrait up once he got there.
Yeah, it's my understanding that it's like a presidential tradition that you pick a former president that you want to model your administration off of, and you put this portrait up. I could be wrong on this. I haven't investigated it, but I've heard it before. And so, when he chose Andrew Jackson, I was like, well,
doesn't that just say it all? Doesn't that just say it all? And let's be honest, I mean, there wasn't exactly a founding father that was pro Indigenous
No, but Andrew
people,
Jackson was
but
right
Andrew
now.
Jackson was definitely one of the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Not someone that we would want anyone today emulating in any manner unless it was dropping dead. That's about it.
Andrew Jackson was a part of the social circle of one of the families that was involved in my family's enslavement. So he will forever, and they will always be on my fuck you list.
Yeah. It's a good list.
Yeah, it is.
It's a good list.
It's hard not to have him on. If someone has a fuck you list, you'd think that, if it's all encompassing, like historical, he should be in the top 10.
He's just terrible.
Trump's a moron, so.
But
of course
I didn't know about that tradition, but I did take when he picked him as the president. I was very much aware of what that meant, and so I don't know. There's a part of me that appreciates that upfrontness. I don't like people who pretend to hate you, or who pretend to like you and then hate you in private. Like, if you're gonna hate me, just hate me out front. That's
the thing, though. I don't necessarily attribute that to any forethought on his part. I just don't think that he really knows who he is what he did.
Trump he's not conscious of everything. I don't believe that he is knowledgeable of history enough to be, but he is a white supremacist.
Oh, definitely.
You're drawn to those
other white supremacists.
Yeah, you're drawn to certain people for a reason. He's right where he belongs.
No, I absolutely believe that. I will absolutely agree with that.
That side, that's drawn to that. So SeDerrick's right. You're drawn to that horror on horrific people. You're drawn to that, and the horror that they drop on people of color, which of course he's been doing years.
And he might not even be thinking about that consciously, or but I don't know. There's all different types of knowing in the world. Sometimes you know things subconsciously. Sometimes you know things because you read it in a book. I do think on some level he does know, but he's maybe not fully conscious of it.
No, I'll agree with you. Like attracts like, and they're definitely in the same wheelhouse.
I feel like, whether, one, as the president, it's his responsibility to know. And obviously not one human being can ever know every single historical and political policy fact there is to know. But, man, if you're going to pick a president to emulate, take the time to look them up, man. Look up Wikipedia.
Right?
That would be nice. But then we are talking about someone who can't even give a speech without mentioning his dick size. So there's only so much that we can ask.
And who
also
also
golf appointment if he took that type of time.
Also makes very strange comments about his daughter that they kind of
incredibly inappropriate comments.
Oh.
He's such a sexual predator. I mean, I can't imagine what happened in that household growing up. And he has made some really similar comments that he's made about Ivanka. He's made similar, or Ivana, I can't remember which one is which.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm like, they're all kind of the same.
Right.
Pretty interchangeable.
He's got this other daughter that he had with Marla Maples, and
Tiffany.
Tiffany, yes. And when Marla was pregnant, or I think it was actually right after she gave birth, he had said to the press, oh, well, clearly, Tiffany has her mother's legs. We'll see if she gets her mother's. And then he, gestured as if, like for breath. And so, I can't help but wonder, did Marla purposely take Tiffany to California to keep her away from him?
Oh,
she's smart.
I think he's openly talked about her wanting her mom to have an abortion when she was pregnant, and she's never seen public with. I think that it's I've heard several comedians talk about it, and I don't know, maybe it's the manner in which they speak about it. It kind of sounds like that's a known thing about their family, is that she's kind of the least favorite child. I don't know why that wouldn't be his too.
Well, it could be because he didn't have enough access to her.
Oh God. I just hope for their sakes that, when I've seen their moms in the past, they definitely look like the type of women who, would have had to do, everything. So I just hope that he was always gone.
I only have so much sympathy for any woman who's willing to climb into that relationship and have a child with that willingly. There's a limit.
I'm a survivor of domestic violence and, intimate
as
partner
am I.
violence. Yeah, so, I'll say, as are far too many of our women, especially Native and, Black women, but, obviously I haven't been in the scenario with Trump, but there have been people that I've dated that, they start out kind and sympathetic, and you think they're this good person, then they get you trapped.
Right.
Yeah.
Get you living with them or getting them legally entangled, and then you can't get out. So, only imagine somebody, a man with the power that Trump has, trying to get away from him. I can't fathom.
As fragile of an ego, because deep down he knows that he has no talent, he is not intelligent, and that his only saving grace is his daddy's money.
With his narcissism, he would never admit any of those things and wouldn't be able to see them.
But you still feel it inside, and it eats at you. And that's why he's always jumping out at people and attacking them. If you even slight him in the slightest way, because he doesn't have an ego or a confidence that's built on actual achievements or things that he worked for or brought about through. I'm not going to say he's never done anything. I don't know that, but
no, we do. There's documented. It's been documented. He's never done anything.
I wanted to hold out
nothing
hope.
Of note.
But since we are being honest, let's just go with what you said.
Well, I think that's why he surrounds himself with military men in his administration, is because they are what he could never be.
Absolutely.
And that's why he also stresses loyalty to him. People, egomaniacs tend to be always obsessed with what you're doing behind their back or.
Mm-hmm. And it's usually because they have no capacity to be loyal to anyone else.
Right. So they know all the things that they would be doing behind the person's back.
And they assume that all of those things are happening and that you're doing them because that's what they're doing.
Well, Jackson, knowing what I know about him, I know he had slaves. He had over 100. He had over 100 of them.
Mm-hmm.
I know he killed some black people, but he also created the Indian Removal Act, and he did some of the worst things any human being has ever done to another person, to Native people. To the Native people on this roundtable, seeing him, because I did get a little upset, I will admit, at not any indigenous people, but white folks and non-natives going, "Whoa, Jackson! How dare Jackson be up there? You're cool with Lincoln? You're cool with Washington? Because they've all been up there this whole time." But having our code talkers there, Jackson in the background, Trump there, like, how does that?
That they even were willing to like speak to him, like, oh, I would never say, oh, they have a strength that I do not. I don't think that I could retain my composure in his presence because he just bothers me. It's not that other people weren't bad. It's that you don't even have like the capacity to like develop a veneer to pretend like you're not shit. like at least I feel like George Bush, as terrible as he was, he pretended like he knew what it was to be the president or like to be a leader or like he knew something about geopolitics or something like that. Like he doesn't even have the capacity to pretend.
No, that's because he's a narcissist.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like I was on Twitter for a little bit today, and there was an Indigenous person who did like this whole series of tweets, and I retweeted some of them today, and they were talking about, you know, what happened with Trump and the code talkers and things, and I really loved a lot of what they had to say because, you know, this is something, like I come from a military family, both sides of my family, both the Native and white side, long history of U.S. military participation. And, you know, Natives actually serve at the highest rate of any other race in the U.S. And, you know, I have such a hard time wrapping my head around that. And I get that when you're living in dire poverty and if the only option that's being presented to you is go enlist in the military, they can make that look really good. And I get that. But I just can't understand why, as Indigenous people, we keep signing up to go and serve for this nation that's been fucking us over for hundreds of years.
I have to agree with that.
You know, and then in the middle of that, we're also going off and we're hurting other people of color. We're hurting their communities. And so, you know, what happened with the code talkers, you know, I feel like every time I talk around Native issues, the word that always comes out is it's complicated, you know, but it's like, one, there was this lack of recognition that this group of men who, you know, all of our people, well, not all, but a lot of our people were put in these boarding schools and the residential schools up in Canada, were beaten and just so much abuse and made to not speak our languages. And then yet the U.S. military says, oh, no, wait, we can actually use this to our advantage. Come here, Native men. You know, come do this. And then, you know, a few decades later, you have Trump standing there with the president, you know, a photo of President Jackson in the background and, you know, him making these horrible Pocahontas comments. And then later today saw a photo of some of the code talkers at a D.C. football game wearing the Redskins gear.
Oh,
and
God.
I hate saying that word, but to me it was just like, this is just like ongoing use of Native people, you know.
I saw that photo too.
I did not see that.
We're just commodities, and that's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we're kind of trotted out when people want to, you know, pat themselves on the back, like, oh, look, we're still going to take care of these little Indians kind of thing. But really, in the end, you're just exotifying us and making us into, like, you know, some kind of circus spectacle.
Yeah, only good to have around when we're useful, and the rest of the time we need to act white. We need to be, we need to meld into the rest of white culture, and we need to not exist for, you know, the sake of white culture, and only come around when it's useful for white culture.
Yep.
That's the harm.
I will say, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, you know, I think all Natives to some extent have experienced that, and I think other other folks of color from other communities have felt that marginalization and that tokenization. I just, I don't know, like I have definitely experienced that myself, and it's just infuriating when you're standing there and you're like, I have to represent all of my people in this moment and over 500 years of genocide and all of the ancestors. and all I want to do is scalp this motherfucker.
Yes.
I was just gonna say that Black people also tend to serve in the military. I think when I last checked, this is like 17%, and I know that Native people like join per capita more than anyone else. But my stepfather served. My great uncle Robert served in World War II, which is really like the only involvement with that sort of thing that I can be okay with, because at least that was stopping. Stopping. I mean, it continued on, but at least I feel like their lives weren't just being needlessly put forth. Like I feel that this country has done to its people in the wars, especially since then. So yeah, that is. I was talking to Nolan about that one day too. That's a really complicated, because I kind of feel that they were fighting to really come back to the only home that they've known, and like especially like with my great uncle Robert, it was like that was a world conflict. So things were terrible here, but it was like fixing that in that moment required people to be willing to step up and go fight in a conflict that they didn't play a part in creating, and to like express maybe a concern for people I at least don't feel that they have returned.
They haven't. I mean, my father, thankfully, did not get drafted to Vietnam. He had a knee problem that disallowed him from the military. They were giving him an exam and said, "Oh, you have a bad knee, get out of here." But he. I
think all my uncles were just young enough. Yeah, and then my grandfather was too old for the draft by that point. So they didn't. I don't have anyone who served in Vietnam. Well, no, I do have people who served. One person who I know who served in Vietnam, but they're not like my immediate family. Well, they kind of are, but not like my mom or uncle's kids or anything like that. They're kind of a little bit further out. But that's the only person that I know who served in Vietnam.
Go ahead, Nolan. I was just gonna say my father served in Vietnam, and so did one of my uncles, and my grandfather also was in Korea, and I had family on the other side, on the white side of my family, that served in Vietnam and World War I and II and all of that stuff. And I remember when I was little, my father would say, this is what the American government did to our people, don't trust the government, blah, blah, blah. But then he would turn around and make these really anti-Asian comments, things that I do not feel comfortable saying. And in my mind, I was always like, well, wait a minute, Dad. If I'm supposed to believe that we natives are good and, the American government is bad, then why did you buy into the idea that Asian folks are bad and that, you're supposed to go kill them in this war half the world over because the U.S. government told you to? And, as I've talked with more Native folks who are vets and active serving, a lot of what I've heard, along with, I was poor, it's the only way I could make money, it's like the U.S. government uses this, they use the warrior narrative that we have within the community, you're protecting your homeland, these are your land, go fight like your ancestors did. And it's well, that's not what we're really doing here. We're protecting white men's financial interests at the end of the day. This isn't protecting our homeland. This is protecting capitalism and white supremacy.
Greed and profit.
The link I just put in the chat is a Pew Research study about who, what.
Oh, yeah.
The military. According to this study, I laugh because it's absurd. Black people serve more than anybody in the military because, according to the study, other percentage are much lower, and the people in the other include quote unquote American Indians, Native Hawaiians, or Pacific Islanders.
It's a per capita.
Multiracial and other/unknown.
But it's like if every demographic joined the military at the rate that natives do, like there would never need to be a draft.
Of course not.
So yeah, black people might be the largest percentage.
No,
like
I mean, this is a lot. I mean, Native people are the most who do serve. But according
it's per capita. Like it's based on their share of the total population.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, depending on what census studies and things you look at, we're either 2.9 million or 5.2 million of the total U.S. population. So, of course, if you're just looking at, the races of people who are in the military or employed or unemployed, any of these things, of course, we're always going to be at the bottom. But, Derek, I think it was you. It is the per capita. It's how much we serve in the military versus that percentage of the population that we make up within the U.S. Yeah.
Well, and this thing, I want to again point out, it refers to Native people as other.
Yeah.
Why the percentages drop down.
I'm sure it's not the only one.
Oh, I know. Yeah. This is the Pew Research Center. It's supposed to be like the prolific place for studies on race in America.
Well, hell, at least they even mentioned us.
Yeah, that is the score. Score one for us, because usually we're not mentioned at all.
Yep.
SeDerrick, you said about how we aren't given back what we put in. When we serve, especially World War II more than any other war. FDR and his lovely wife said, "Look, yo. If you serve and you fight Hitler for it, we're going to take care of you."
Well, yeah, we've heard that before.
We've
heard that before.
My father worked for Universal back in the day, and he was actually trying to make a movie. Now, there's a reason why this movie was never made, because of the title. The title of it was Eleanor Roosevelt's Niggers. That's not going to be made. But the point was how that family and that woman lied to us after we shed our blood, sweat, and tears for this country. And
more than I get pissed off at that, because I know who those people are. I don't know. There's something in me that is a little bit more angered by the people who came over after those kind of conflicts. A lot of the people who were involved, who we were trying to help, and to watch them come over and then recreate the same systems and just opt into the same system of anti-blackness as everyone else. That is a special kind of slap in the face.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
There's a lot of players for that.
We did not. I mean, nobody came over. I mean, maybe it's not a totally fair thing to say, but no one came over to help us with the Civil War. I kind of have reservations that anyone would ever, just because of the position of this continent, it's farther away than Eurasia is kind of separated. So it's kind of hard for a force to get all the way here.
Well, still, we had, not we, but history had the United States of America eventually go all the way to Europe to save and liberate the Jewish people. Yet it's been, if you count it all up, it's been 5 centuries for the both of us here. And also, I would say Africa, because look at Libya right now. Mm-hmm. South America for indigenous people. Also, you could say Australia for Aboriginal people. Mm-hmm. And where are the darn, boats coming off, off the shore, liberating us?
Right.
Where are they?
Where's your voice? I actually went on a date with a very lovely, it didn't work out, but he was a Jewish gentleman, and he has some very uncharitable things to say about Palestine. And I was like, I don't know, I just felt it ironic. I just found it a little ironic, honestly. I was just like, wow, it's kind of weird that you can't put yourself in their shoes, just given the history of Jewish people and like how it's like been forced to go from country to country and because of like racism and hatred. Like,
I mean, I do agree with. I do agree with that. I will say, though, I don't think that the U.S. entered World War II to go save the Jewish people.
Oh no, of course no.
Or anybody else.
It had loaned Britain a bunch of money.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. joined after we got bombs. Like, that's, you know, I'm like, let's be honest. The U.S. isn't going in to help anybody if it's not within our financial interest. You know?
Right, yeah.
How many white countries have they attacked outside of World War II?
Oh my God!
Yeah. Well, did we go to war with like Kosovo or like was Bosnia?
More of
Bosnia
people in that situation.
Yeah,
we're kind of.
Are those considered white countries? I mean,
they're European nations, so technically, yes, they are white, but you know,
not white enough.
Yeah.
Yeah,
East
Europe does kind of get treated like the runt of like the litter of Europe. Like the Balkans.
Look at the Romanis in the Holocaust. They're always forgotten about.
Yeah.
No, they're not white enough. Of course, in the black.
I mean, Europe isn't just this like unified lump either. I don't know.
But we often hear about it as though it is.
Yeah, but within Europe, that's not discourse at all. So I think, I mean, obviously, things are represented differently about America in Europe, and you know, Europe is represented differently here to make this rhetoric happen. But it's definitely. I mean, that whole like the effort to unify is there, but each nation sees itself as its own nation, culture, and you know, language, and there has always been a hierarchy within that as well. So otherwise, no Europeans would have, you know, no like white Jewish people would have died in the Holocaust. So there's no unification.
Perfect segue, Tanja, because the other topic that we have on the agenda is the erasure of the racism that we experience in this society. And I remember talking to you about that study that I found about, well, a study, it was an article detailing how black Germans are not counted in the census. And you go back to World War II, all the black people were stripped of their citizenship and then mostly put in concentration camps and killed. And to this day, it's like they haven't learned anything from that because there's a million of us now that are about 25,000 men, and we're not counted in the census. And then,
but that's because there's no census. So I think
there's no census at all. So it's just like everybody's German and
random dovetail. Mexico only recently started counting its Afro population, like last year or like the year after.
Mhm. But I think that that's part of the post-war project in Germany, for example, is that this idea of multiculturalism and colorblind racism. That if
so
we
you
just
don't ask about it.
Yeah,
France
it's not
is like
a thing.
That too. It's illegal to ask people in France like what their race, or like to take a census or do something where you're like collecting racial data. They would consider that inherently well. That's what they claim, but really it's just a reverse purity thing.
But it's also the thing that if you don't have the language to talk about it, you don't have the language to talk back. And it's not like Afro-Germans don't exist or, you know, large amounts of Germans with other nations or with other backgrounds, but we don't even have the words to fully describe the experience or our existence. So how do we complain about anything or say anything?
Right, because everyone's supposed to kind of be like this thing, because you live in a state that has traditionally been like more ethno-based.
But has it, or is that what we've done?
Well, no, right, this is what we tell, that's what we tell ourselves, because France will certainly have, and I just know a lot about French, because I'm Creole, and I grew up speaking French, but yeah, they've always pretended to be a lot more homogenous than, I mean, France is a homogenous place, but not as homogenous as they pretend.
it's not at all. Like, I used to live in France. It's not at all. And I think, I mean, that's why parts of it are constantly burning. And it's but it's the myth that, you know, Europe is the thing that is somehow working. And yeah, there's some issues, and the past was something that was an issue. But overall, it's yeah, terrible.
There's a few of us on this roundtable that are of mixed descent and part white. So we go through this Western society and this American society and are told off and on that because we're part white or because we're light skinned or look white or what have you, the racism that we experience isn't as bad, or we don't count as the race that we are. And just speaking for me, that's one of the many instances where, hey, you know, you're putting me through pain here, you're hurting me, but you're trying to pretend like I'm not going through anything. And obviously, Native people go through that more than anybody in this country, because it's, oh, you are all dead, or you're mostly dead, or it doesn't matter, it's our country now, so moving on. You know, that's just kind of it's like banging your head against the wall. Like, hey, you know, I'm bleeding here, and you're cutting me deeper, but you're saying this is a problem.
I hear what you're saying. I do have white ancestry. It's a little bit further back than yours. But I have ancestors who would have been in the house, in the big house. I have ancestors who would have been outside. And because I have white passing people in my family, I grew up with a very wide view of what blackness was. It's only, we were talking earlier that it's only kind of recently that like I'm kind of realizing that like Louisiana experience isn't everyone's, and that's not necessarily as common in other places. But I was always kind of raised with this belief that if you're black, you're black. And so if we're, like, people like say that, I don't know, what's her name, Megan, she's getting married to the prince. They say that she's passing, but to me, she doesn't look like a passing person, because I have a great aunt who looked even less black than she was, and she identified only as black. And like married a black man, like the 50s and 60s, and like had visibly black kids. So I don't know. I think mine was just maybe more of a special experience, but I'm really grateful for. I do think it's important to recognize that colorism does exist, and people who, I consider myself to be a dark-skinned person, but I have a cousin who's darker than me, and I can tell you that his life experience was a hell of a lot harder than mine. Mm-hmm. So I think that we can acknowledge that without throwing people away by imposing our own blood quantum, which is foolish.
If only the rest of white America would do that too.
You know, I actually was just talking with, this like came up when I was talking with Nolan earlier, but, you know, I am a lighter skinned Indigenous person, and I'm mixed race. I've never denied that. My mom's side of the family is white, and even my father is mixed. He's Cherokee, and I've been told European, but I can't confirm that. But, you know, my last name is Deerinwater. Like, yes, I get that when I walk down the street, people see a white woman. And that in and of itself is incredibly painful, because that is erasing my existence as an Indigenous person. That's erasing what my ancestors went through and gave up so that I can be standing here today. It's erasing 500 years of our women being raped by white men that led to so many of us being lighter. Like, it's erasing all of that, but at the same time, I'm like, if you think that I walk through this world every day with the last name Deerinwater being treated like a white person, then you don't get it. But I can also say on the flip side of that is that I get treated a whole hell of a lot worse when people hear my last name. So it's like, it's that little, I guess, insight of, of the so-called white passing, which I don't like that term for a lot of reasons. But it's like I get a little taste of what it must be like to be white in the world. But then, it's like that smack back into reality when people hear my last name,
I sometimes wonder about my ancestors who would have had parents who were their masters, what that must have been like and how perverse of a dynamic that is. And that's actually one of the sickest things about colonialism and slavery and things of that nature is how it warps and like perverts family dynamics.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Absolutely.
I've heard not always the best things about Thomas Jefferson's black kids.
He kept them as slaves. Like he didn't go, all right, y'all are okay. You can.
Well, I've heard that when white people were not around, that they ran things, and not in a good way. But it's in one of these books in this living room. I'm gonna have to find it, but it's in one of them. I'll have to find the quote. But I also try to just remember that's a sick situation, man.
Yeah.
They've lightened, they've darkened our skin through time, I've noticed, with portraits of mixed race slaves. Because I'll read about one slave or a slave family, and then if they have pictures of those people, I'm like, why are they so dark? Because they saying that they're very light skin, and then I'm looking at their portrait. They're erasing their whiteness because like, oh wait, no, he's a slave, so he can't be white at all. The superiority factor. And the slave is dark, free man is white.
I want to read you a section of a diary. It's a diary from the Civil War. It's from a social acquaintance from one of my clan sisters. But I just want you to hear this because it's a quote that's always really stuck with me. And she wrote this diary throughout the Civil War. Where is it? Right. Wait. Oh, okay. Like the patriarchs of old, our men live all in one house with their wives and their concubines, and the mulattoes that everyone sees in every family exactly resemble the white children, and every lady tells you who is the father of all the mulatto children in everyone's household, but those in her own she seems to think dropped from the clouds, or so pretends to think. I remember reading that like when I think I was a freshman in college when I first started like just researching the Civil War and both like my personal family history, and I came across it, and it really captured the disgustingness of it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In a way that, she phrased that perfectly. Read things that disgust you. Sometimes it is worth it.
Well, that's our daily lives. You can't like at least like when I wake up in the morning, and I like to stay abreast of the news. If I wake up in the morning and I look at the news, I'm instant disgust. It's almost impossible. I think it is. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's impossible to be black or indigenous and aware in this country and not be disgusted every 5 minutes.
That's true, but I also have black and white passing ancestors who they just embody resistance, and not in a way that's like our type of resistance, which is, I think, a little bit more academic. There's this, like, it's almost so subtle because it's like their daily life is resistance. Like, I grew up like eating like watermelons that my family cultivated, and like learning about the history of watermelons and how that comes from Africa, and like how white people wouldn't have known how to cultivate that plant. Like, I've always felt really, really grateful that I was able to grow up around a lifeway that in some way was similar to what it would have probably been like in Africa. And just to have grandparents who have lived through and some of the most dangerous areas and some of the most like racially charged times, and like they saw that through, and like they didn't kill anyone or themselves.
We all have remarkable restraint.
They're saints.
Absolutely.
I don't see how they've done it. I really don't.
Well, that goes back to the code talkers the other day.
Yeah, it does.
You were saying, how do you?
Yeah. Hey, how are you just standing there? Like.
Yeah. I remember watching interviews of Stokely Carmichael, Malcolm X, and other black revolutionaries of the day, and with white journalists, right liberal journalists, and it asks them the most racist, condescending questions, insinuating the worst things. I'm like, how has the brother not jumped over the table and beaten him with a lead pipe by now? You know? But I think, for one, if there's hope, if we can find hope in things, I think, one, we were born in certain times, so the mental state that we have currently, we can deal with the current makeup of the reality that we currently live in. Because I've said this before about myself. If I was born in the 60s, I would have been killed. If I was born during slavery, I would have been killed. I wouldn't have been able to handle it. I wouldn't have been able to handle it.
I sometimes think about one of my grandfathers, and who just lived through that, who lived through slavery, who was born in like the 1830s, and I don't know.
Well, the key that you're both missing is that in order to live, you had to live. So there's no manner of things that you can survive if the goal is just to live. The quality of life is not an option at that point. It's just survival.
And I agree with that totally,
I think to some extent, both the Native and Black community are still doing that. Like, we're still trying to survive. We're still trying to get, through our day and make sure that, like, all of our future generations will be here, and hopefully things will be better for them. I mean, like, when I think about being out at Standing Rock, like, one, that's not my people's land, that's not, it wasn't my tribal nation going through that, and I respect that I was there as a visitor upon, another nation's land, but in my mind, it was so hard to stay calm seeing all of those abuses, experiencing them, feeling tear gas and mace entering my body. And, like, I wanted to just start swinging. I wanted to start hurting those cops for doing those things to us. But at the same time, I just had to keep thinking, my ancestors survived so I could be here. And if I do these things, I can't go on.
Right.
And, like, even if we all wanted to fight, like, the U.S. military has got us beat. Like, we have to find other ways to resist and survive. And
yes,
my grandparents lived in a part of Louisiana that only had like 3 to 5% of the total population of the total state, and it was in northern Louisiana. It didn't experience any destruction during the Civil War. Most of that was down south near New Orleans. But this part of Louisiana had like the highest murder rate, not just in the state, in the nation following the Civil War, from about like 1866 to like 1870. And like there would be like these clusters of murders that would happen right before and right after political elections, because this is during Reconstruction. And the state is trying to get rid of this radical element. And I think about that I have a research article on it. It's called Bloody Caddo. And I think about that all the time. Like, how the hell did you stay here?
Even though
because existence is resistance.
But that alone, like, to vote for a black man or a black woman to vote.
Oh, they weren't even voting then. Well, I mean, I guess technically they could, but
I'm just saying that's considered radical.
Oh,
before 1865, or right now in Libya, to not be a slave and be black.
You know what that family was doing? Who owned us? They were financing the overthrow of Reconstruction. They went right back to their same social position after the war. Two of their members, two of the members of that family I know specifically fought. One did die, not the one that should have. Well, I guess both of them did deserve they were doing terrible things, but not the big baddie. But yeah, they went right back to their same social position after that, like it never even happened.
I was just in Louisiana last month, and I spent about a month down there, and I was mostly in New Orleans and going down in southern parts of the state. But I visited St. James Parish and the town of St. James, which was founded by Black folks who were free after slavery, and just seeing that land and like hearing their stories. I was interviewing a lot of folks, Black and Native, about resource extraction in Louisiana and how that's impacted them and future generations. And it was really just being there. One, being in this place, where there's a giant plantation just down the road that white folks go to and just revel in that bullshit. And then like I'm driving down this back. Yeah, I'm driving down this backcountry highway, and it's just like one chemical factory and oil and gas refinery after another. And I'm talking with the people of St. James and listening to their stories of like their, all of their ancestors and, and how they survived, the horrors of the slave trade and the Civil War and all of this, and how they fought to get free and all of these things. And then now this community is being polluted in so many ways by white capitalism. But, it was like, it's like, okay, it's the harm that we saw from slavery, it is continuing on in some ways. It's just taken a more modern turn, but at the same time, so is that resistance. Because those people, they're getting together. Not, they're poor folks, they're working hard and all that, but they're still finding the time to get together and meet in their local church and talk about how they're going to fight these pipelines, how they're going to fight these chemical plants and everything. And it's, I don't know, I keep trying to find hope because I see the Native community and other communities who are marginalized, like, finding the will to survive and the will to fight back. It just comes in different ways. And I feel like I lost my train of thought a ways back.
My great-grandfather, his name is Leonard, there's a story that's told about him that the church that we considered like our traditional church home in Louisiana, the white people who own that land wouldn't let us like rent the space or build on it or anything like that, and they tried to get the church community to pay. I don't remember what the original price was, but it was like some extortion thing. And my great grandfather, I don't know what he did. He died in 2001, and I never got to ask him about it. But he went and had a conversation with them on his own and got them to give it to him for like $300, and that's how they got the land to build that church. And I think that they did stuff like that. I don't know, because I guess they did know that we just had to endure. And we just had to have some space to. And I think that's kind of hard for men to do, particularly, especially if you probably did just survive this war. The death rate for black soldiers in the Civil War was only like 3%. Most people died of like disease, not from actually fighting. And I had always wondered like why those people didn't just pick up arms again. But it's like once the country has been reunified and the North doesn't really have a reason to, or it's vastly losing interest in upholding this thing called Reconstruction, and really what they were asking us to fight for in the first place. It just,
but part of that is the fight to resist that terror and just be smart about what you're doing. But I think also part of that is a hint of believing that this system is going to get us out of this.
No, it's in their case, I don't think that that's the case.
I'm just saying,
yeah.
I'm generalizing. I'm not
saying
because I remember when I was a kid, and I did a book report on Frederick Douglass, and I was reading about him, like, he's meeting with the president, and he's trying to help us, and I'm like, I'm a kid, I'm like you thought you beat up your slave master to get free, but now you're trying to go with legislation to fix all this. And then you flash forward, 50s, 60s, we're doing the same thing again, trying to get legislation going to free us. And then how many times did you see Black Lives Matter folks talking to presidential candidates this past election about, police violence in our communities, like, help us. And I'm just thinking, like, how much longer are we going to go with that route? Because I watched a movie today. It was Selma. And there was a line in the movie, LBJ said to MLK, said, "You're just going to have to wait." How much longer we don't have to wait for? How much longer do we have to? I'm not saying, I think Jen is the one who said it. I'm not saying let's go march to the Capitol with machinery, with ammunition and everything. I'm just saying, how long do we have to wait and be overly patient?
Martin Luther King, even though, I guess I'm bringing him up because people associate him with, like, love, or that's the character he kind of gets reduced to. But they wondered about those same things. And I've heard Cornel West kind of talk about, like, how every Black intellectual reaches kind of that point where they have to start going, like, or you just have to think about that or reconcile that in your mind. Because there is something about this society that seems to just think that, like, it has, like, an unlimited amount of time. And that's kind of why I started talking about my great-grandmother's experience with Social Security and being left out of it, and not getting a Social Security check, and her being alive. One of the reasons I tell that story is because I want people to know that, her great-grandfather was enslaved. Like, these legacies and these histories they live on, like, they're 2 generations removed. Like, there's like 2 people in my family that would separate her from him. He was enslaved. So these legacies and these histories are much more personal than what people want to believe. And these issues are so much deeper than we want to believe. And I find that makes us, because we want to believe that it's not a very big problem, we go for these superficial type problems. Superficial type solutions. And then are kind of surprised when it doesn't go deep. But I also think it is our responsibility Black people are lucky to be alive. Native people are lucky to be alive. And we have to use that to the best of our ability to make sure that our peoples grow and thrive in the future. Like, I understand that there are times that you have to defend yourself and things happen, but I just want us always just to hold our lives precious.
Yeah, and we have to try to continue to make progress in spite of the Trump administration and everything that he's trying to make us go backwards.
Absolutely.
Actually, my granddaddy called me yesterday and was like, "When are you going to be out of grad school? I'm ready to retire." I still feel like an obligation to, like, I can't just be like Rambo. Like, I have to give them some, and my mom and my uncles and my cousins also help. But every one of their grandchildren, every one of their 5 kids, like, we all just feel like this overwhelming just duty. Like, it's almost kind of like the stuff you see, like, in Game of Thrones, like this fealty to your house. it's not like it's not a house in that sense, but it almost is like, kind of feels like we owe them our lives. And we do, obviously, in a biological sense, but they've just given so much, and like this country has given them nothing in return, paid them in death, and like taken advantage of them and leverage the fact that they're not educated. Like my grandparents, they can't tell you like the legislation that, you know, they got left out of or anything like that. They know that they've always gotten the short end of the stick, but they can only go so far with you. And like, that's one of the reasons that I take it upon myself. Like, I know those things for them. Whether the state ever decides to do right or not, I'm not ever going to forget it.
You know, Nolan, when you mentioned the LBJA thing and you just have to be patient, I was literally on a call earlier today, and I'm gonna try not to give too much information because, you know, I want to be able to keep fighting in the environmental movement and all that sort of shit. And I'm sorry I'm cussing so much today. I'm really tired. I'm tired. It's a beaten down kind of day. But this person that was on this call, I assume that they are white. Everything they said sounded like a white person. They never identified themselves as, you know, Native or a person of color. But we were all at a conference recently, and some Indigenous folks had been invited to come attend this conference, but we really weren't given space in a meaningful way. Like, it was very clear we hadn't been involved in the planning of it. Neither had disabled people. You know, it was just very problematic. And some of our elders were calling these issues out. And there was one elder in particular who has been at the forefront of the water protection movement since Standing Rock started forming camps back in April of 2016, I think. And, you know, she was up there and she was angry. Like, all of this pain and this anger and this rage that she's feeling from living day in and day out as, you know, an Indigenous person, an Indigenous woman, being on the front lines day in and day out of land that, you know, they've got pipelines and uranium mining, all kinds of nasty shit happening. You know, she got up there and she said some, like, she didn't sugarcoat the truth, and I respect her so much for that. But it really put some white folks off. And quite frankly, I don't care if it put white folks off. But on this call today, it's this group of us, and, you know, this to be fighting in this one particular movement together. And this person got on there and said, well, you know, we had people up there cussing and calling people out and saying horrible things, and, you know, some folks just have to be patient.
Oh, that's definitely a white person.
She literally said that, and, like, you know, she wouldn't say, oh, it was such and such of such and such tribal nation, and, you know, oh, it wasn't, you know, she wasn't saying, oh, it's the Indigenous people, but you knew that's who she was talking about, and it took every last bit of my self-restraint to keep from reading her like the riot act.
I don't have
like,
it.
How dare you tell us to be patient when we're the ones being shot and maced and incarcerated, and our lands are being polluted and stolen from us still, and, like, our women are being raped and trafficked and murdered. Like, who the hell do you think you are to tell us to be patient?
Amen.
We've been patient.
A privileged white woman. A privileged white woman.
Distraction.
Exactly.
They just throw that at us like, no. Your time for freedom will come. Just stand in line. It's like the DMV or something.
No,
never gonna get
that's not what it is at all.
Wait.
It's be patient, and eventually we'll kill you all off, and then it'll be fine.
Right.
Yes.
You'll go extinct, or you'll get tired and so ground down that you'll stop complaining about it, and then we won't have a problem. That's the be patient. It's not that we'll ever actually get where we want to be. It's that they're hoping that we'll either be so exhausted or that there won't be any of us left to want to fight, to continue asking for what we've been asking for 500 years, which is basic human rights.
And that is an incorrect assumption, because I got 15 first cousins and 5 uncles and aunts, and we will be remembering. They say in Game of Thrones, the North remembers,
SeDerrick family.
Yes.
They got it.
We remember a hell of a lot more than the North.
I've seen 3 different sides to a modern day Black Panther. And I don't mean the new Black Panthers. I mean the brothers and sisters who were in the Black Panthers back in the day, former Panthers. I've seen that beaten down Panther. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to assimilate in this society. It's too much. It's too painful. I've seen the gone off the edge and lost, just lost their mental faculties, or I've seen no, we're gonna keep fighting until we get free. So that's hard to argue with, because it's like, they beat you down until you want to give up. At least that's what they try to do.
But as hard as it is, our ancestors, they did the hardest part.
Yes, they did.
I don't feel like I have the right to.
I mean, we can complain. I mean, this is one thing I've learned.
Oh, I'm damn sure going to
I will never blame a Black or Indigenous person for complaining about this place, ever. But
complaining, yes, but we really can't give up. It's just we can't give up.
If you don't,
the generations after us need us to never give up.
What's that quote? If you don't complain, or if you're silent about your suffering, they'll kill you and say that you enjoyed it. Nah.
Oh, that's a good one.
I want to.
That's a good one.
I want my feelings to be registered on record. I was having a debate.
This is being recorded, so we're all good.
Yeah,
we're all good on that count.
I used to have debates in high school with people about things like reparations, and they would always say, look, whether you pay or not, I guess it's on you, but just understand that we're not going to be reconciled until until that history is put to bed.
Exactly.
We're not going to move on. We're not going to move on. It's not that I hate you. It's not that I wish anything bad to happen to you.
No.
It's that we are not going to live in a reality or in a world where we just pretend things that are demonstrably untrue are true, and I'm not going to pretend that my great-grandmother didn't have this experience, that my uncles and aunts didn't have this experience. You should listen. My grandparents can tell you, there were no schools for my grandparents to go to in rural Louisiana, even when they were coming up. So it's just it just really irritates me when someone tells me that, oh, well, you didn't experience slavery, you didn't do this.
It's in my DNA.
I've seen the results.
Exactly.
It's in my DNA. The trauma is there. I've experienced it.
I've not only experienced it through my blood, I've also just seen my family overcome it and do it with a grace that you were just not entitled.
That white people can't fathom.
You just aren't even entitled. And that's why I also get really offended when people try to lecture to me about patriotism and having to love people.
Yeah,
you don't understand anything about love until you fight for people who consistently do not fight for you.
Unless I see Mandela and the South African flag, you're going to see no patriotism from me.
I don't even know why we need patriotism. Can't we just love the people? And I took a class with
nationalism. It's white nationalism.
Kim Tallbear. She used to teach at the University of Texas at Austin, but I took her the last semester she was there, and I've listened to interviews since then because she had a really big impact on me. And one thing she said that I've really been contemplating lately is that you should love the people and you should love the land.
Yes.
And that's what I'm trying to. I don't understand why that's not sufficient.
Well, we're not people.
Because
we first have to be human beings to the society to be counted.
Exactly. Because neither one of those things is tied up in capitalism or greed. That's the problem. And because we're currently living in a capitalist society built on a hierarchical regime which is going to implode because it has to. Because it's an untenable model. It's an untenable model. You cannot continue to mine for resources that are finite and think that that's going to go on forever. It's a completely untenable model. And for the American exceptionalism to continue on like it's been with this narcissistic dream that it can go on forever is going to blow up and it's going to collapse. Period.
speaking of going on forever, I don't know if you saw pictures of like in New Orleans when they were taking some of those Confederate statues down. There's one picture that really stuck with me, and it's like of this older woman. She's probably like 60 or 70, and she's of the age that I would never like actually like laugh at her, like if she was like in my person. But because it was a picture, I didn't feel as that. She's like weeping and sobbing as this statue comes down, and I just couldn't help but think like, or just like question myself, like, lady, do you know that you could have a relationship with real people?
No.
And not like that statue?
No.
Like, did you cry like when Tamir Rice died?
No.
Or like
no. No.
Or like
no.
Like, do you have any?
She can't name any one of the Native youths that have died. She cannot name any one of the African youths that have died. She can probably name some of the white kids that have been, injured in her area, but no.
She was sobbing like she was losing like a personal member of her family, and just as a family who had white people who were Confederates, I don't see the attraction.
They don't want to.
I don't either, but racism runs deep. So does hate. People like to be ignorant because being ignorant means you don't have to take accountability for that history. Being ignorant means that you don't have to take accountability for your own actions and for your own stupidity. It just means that you get to continue being ignorant and you get to continue allowing that greed and that hatred to build and to do harm to other people and get to throw your hands in the air and go, well, I didn't do it. Yeah, you did.
They've done studies proving that if you're white and ignorant, you are happy as hell.
Yep.
Well, why would you not be happy?
Yeah, honestly, you won the lottery. You have the world.
The reason they say ignorance is bliss is ignorance is bliss.
It is.
Look at Ben Carson's face and tell me there's not a happier man on the planet. Look how much he's smiling. He's always smiling, Ben.
Oh, his luggage. Someone get his luggage.
Well, this is like really enjoyable and cathartic, but we've gone over an hour. Hopefully, I'll see all of you very soon back on here on a very not too distant Wednesday night. But this is great, and I thank all of you for being on here, and I'm privileged to share this with you all.
Same here. It was great speaking with you all. I will talk to you next week.
Have a good night.
You too.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.